Hey guys, what's up? Just another video here talking about some of the games that I have a history with, and this one I have a kind of a love-hate thing with, and that is Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. If you were anything like me as a child, you played the first Legend of Zelda, you loved it, and then when the second one came out, you were like, "Oh my God, gotta have it!" And yeah, then you played it, and well, let's get into it. First of all, this isn't a bad game, and I think it gets a bad rep as the black sheep of the series because it's so different from the other ones. But at the time when this game came out, there was no established formula. There was nothing that said that like the Zelda games had to be this top-down perspective or anything like that. So I don't see how that's a fair criticism. Taking the second game in the series and being like, "Oh, it's terrible because it's so different from the other ones." It's not really a terrible game. It definitely wasn't what people were expecting. It kind of had that whole Ninja Gaiden side-scrolling thing, and then action-y swordplay thing. You had the top-down overworld thing going on, but it wasn't. You didn't engage enemies in the overworld here, you know, and enemy encounters were random, much like Final Fantasy, and except that you saw them coming, so you had a chance to escape. It wasn't like you had to. You just randomly popped into a battle and didn't know what was going on. But the game, I think the biggest thing to take away from the game is, especially at the time, the demographic for it was it was hard as fuck, and you're gonna die a lot. Fuck you fucking alligator motherfucker. These fucking fish guy. Everything that hits you takes away your experience points. Fuck! No, that was dumb. So there can be some frustrating moments in the game, as you can see. Uh, Although that one, I will say, was partially my fault. I shouldn't have stopped to get the pea bag, but meh. But the difficulty of the game, it's not terrible at first. The first palace, the Iron Knuckles kind of, in the Stalfo Knights, kind of ease you into what you're going to basically be doing for the rest of the game. But the next section you have to go through is Death Mountain. And Jesus Christ, it just punches you in the fucking balls. Death Mountain in Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link might be the hardest section of the game outside of the Great Palace. It's just, especially if you don't have a guide to tell you what cave to go into, you can be there for hours. Then if you die and you lose all 3 lives, you start back at the North Palace, because fuck you, that's why. All in all, though, I mean, there is some aspects that the game did really well. Like, the exploration's pretty cool. Looking around trying to find your heart containers and your magic containers to increase your health and magic bars, which, speaking of magic, this was the first game that introduced the magic meter into the series and let you have magical spells. You had shield, fire, fairy, jump, thunder, life. That might be it. I could be missing one. I'm not 100% sure. But it was kind of a neat little system. You had towns to explore, which you didn't really have. You didn't have any towns in the first game, and I mean, it's kind of the first one that had like a large number. Well, it's not really kinda. I mean, there was NPCs in The Legend of Zelda, but all they did was basically give you stuff or charge you money for breaking their doors. But this one had a large number of NPCs. The towns were populated. There was people that could replenish your health, replenish your magic meter, and things of that nature. So I mean, it kind of varied it up. But you had to watch out because later on there were some sneaky motherfuckers that did shit like that. Fucking motherfucking bastards. Assholes. The overall arch of the game, though, was you had to go through 6 palaces and place crystals and statues at the end of each palace, and by doing that you were going to unlock the seal on the Great Palace, which would enable you to retrieve the Triforce of Courage and awaken a Princess Zelda from the past that had been placed under a sleeping spell by a wizard because her brother wanted the Triforce for himself, and she refused to divulge the information to him, so the wizard, in a fit of rage, cast a spell on her and put her to sleep. The prince, in his anguish, basically decreed that all princesses, or all daughters of the royal family from there on out, would be named Zelda, which was about the most backstory we had so far at this point in the series. This was also a direct sequel to The Legend of Zelda, but the Zelda we were trying to awaken in this game was not the same Princess Zelda from that first game. Actually, they never really mentioned what happened to that Princess Zelda. Strange. But you went through each palace, there was an item you had to find, and there'd be a boss at the end. And the palaces were very maze-like, for lack of a better term. Actually, that might be a very accurate description. There was multiple branching pathways you could go, and some of them were dead ends, some of them led you to a key that you needed for a section 5 screens ago that was down, you know, like right there. If you went down the elevator, you weren't fucked, but I mean, you couldn't go anywhere because you either needed a key to get to the candle, or so on and so forth. So you have to, like, a walkthrough for this game is very handy if you have it. If not, you're going to be spending a lot of time backtracking and walking around, which is, I guess, depending on what kind of game you like, that's not entirely a bad thing. But given the fact that you have 3 lives, and if you lose those 3 lives, you start back at the North Palace, it could be a bad thing. Especially when you get to the later temples and palaces, you got a lot of walking to do to get back to them. Another thing that I kind of thought was lacking in this game, especially now looking back, and people may or may not disagree with me, was the bosses are pretty lackluster. Horsehead here was kind of cool looking. Actually, I thought he was really cool looking in the Captain N game or the Captain N cartoon that he appeared in, where he was an actual centaur. But they didn't have they weren't visually striking like they were in the first game. Like in the first game, you had, you know, the Aqua Mantis Dragon, you had Gleeok, he was so fucking awesome. I wish he'd come back in a 3D Zelda, because that would be an interesting fight. You had Manhanla, you had Goma, which Goma has appeared in various forms throughout the course of the series. You had, what was the other one? The Dongo, he's come back in Ocarina of Time and stuff like that. And there was a couple other games, what was the other one? Manhanla, I said him. But Moldorm. But at any rate, the bosses in this game were just kind of, you know, they were either big knights or an iron knuckle or some weird barbarian-looking dude. But the dragon was kind of cool. Who I think in the original release of the American game, his name was Barbas. But they retconned him, his name, to match with the dragon from Ocarina of Time. They retconned him to be Volvasia. But, I mean, the bosses were just kind of... The Thunderbird was kind of neat. And then this was the first game where you had Dark Link fight, which he was the final boss. But I think that's the main... I would say the main detraction from the whole experience is just that the experience wasn't that memorable. I mean, it wasn't a bad game, but compared to the visuals that, or the visual style of the preceding and then the subsequent games, the Adventure of Link just kind of comes off as plain. you're just kind of fighting your iron knuckles, and there's no real substance to the enemies that you're fighting. The moblins were cool looking, the Octoroks were cool looking, and they do return in this game. Your bokoblins, your whatever goblins fucking shit that they have in every goddamn game. The Stalfos were in this, but I mean, the new enemies just, like, I couldn't even tell you the name of those weird bears that throw the clubs at you in the palaces, and this goddamn alligator guys. I fucking hate those guys. Is it worth playing, though, is I think the ultimate question here. And I think it all depends on the person. If you're expecting a typical Legend of Zelda game, then maybe skip it. But if you enjoy a challenge, you like these side-scrolling action games, then this is probably up your alley. The difficulty isn't absurd to the point where you're never going to beat it. I will say I never beat it when I was a kid, mainly because it was, at that point in time, I was just like, fuck this, well, I didn't say fuck, but I mean, it was just like beyond my realm of skill as a, God, I forget how old I was when this game came out, but it was hard as hell, and I always tried, but I just never got anywhere with it, and then eventually I moved on to other games. But as an adult going back and playing it, I appreciate it a little bit more now than I think I did when I was a kid. But I think that a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was just so different. I don't know. It's a funny game to try to recommend to people because it is so divisive with how it was received. And at this point in time, I think 20 some odd years since it's been out, people pretty much know what to expect with it. And I think by now, anybody that's been curious as to whether or not they should play the game, they've probably tried it out. Because, I mean, you had it on, the Nintendo, then there was the collector's edition disc that came with Wind Waker. I think if you pre-ordered it, it had the two NES games, Ocarina of Time, and then Majora's Mask on it. And then, virtual console releases. There was I think a Game Boy Advanced or a Game Boy Color. I think it was a Game Boy Advance release. It was part of like the NES Masterpiece series or whatever they called it. I don't know what they called it. But one thing I will say that really stuck with me from playing this game then and now is I love the music, especially the temple theme, and I really like the overworld theme. It harkens back to the original overworld theme, but it switches it up a little bit, makes it a bit different. But the Great Palace theme is fucking badass too. But the music was really good. It wasn't composed by Koji Kondo, who is the main composer for the series, and I can't remember the guy's name that composed the music for this game. I probably wouldn't be able to pronounce it anyways. But the music, by far, I would say is the best thing to come out of this game, and I wish they would bring back some of those tunes, update them a little bit, and put them in a new game, especially that Palace theme. I think the only thing the Palace theme has showed up in is Smash Brothers. And maybe even try working that overworld theme into it a little bit somewhere. They kind of been switching up the overworld theme a little bit with just a couple callbacks to that original theme. But all in all, looking back at it now, like I said, it's outside the difficulty, it's not a bad Zelda game. And I think that's the only thing that really hurts people from getting into this, is it's just that if you're used to kind of, like, Zelda's more of like a casual game. I hate to use that term, but I mean, it's not known for being overtly difficult, and really any difficulty from the series comes from people that try to do like the 3 heart runs or things like that. There's no inherent difficulty within the game itself. It's not punishing beyond the point of playability. Whereas this one, every mistake cost you. Certain enemies kind of felt cheap. Like, I really hate those alligator guys. Fucking cocksucking bastards. But, plus you're like, you get this little dagger sword to try to hit them assholes. But, you know, all in all, it's not my favorite Zelda game, but I wouldn't say it's my least favorite Zelda game. You know, it's all up to the person. Right now, you know, I wouldn't say it's in my top 5, but it is definitely a game that I do play from time to time. Not as much as some other games like A Link to the Past or Twilight Princess or something like that. But, I mean, I do play it once every couple years or so. I get a bug that makes me want to go through and see what I can kind of re-experience it a little bit. And, you know, that's enough for me to say that while it might not be one of my favorite games of all time, it definitely has left its impression upon me, and I do enjoy it for what it is. And for the most part, what it is a decent side-scrolling adventure game. I just think maybe it gets a little bit of a bad rep, and it gets kind of dumped on needlessly. But, you know, it is what it is. So anyways, guys, we're going to wrap this video up here, and probably the next one I'll talk about my favorite Zelda game of all time, The Adventure. I almost said The Adventure of Link again, A Link to the Past. But until then, I want to thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Alright, have a good one, guys.